Welcome back, friends. It's another episode of the Mindful CEO, where time is just a construct. We are going to talk about time today, but first I'll bring in my friend and co-host Aaron. Hello, Aaron. How are you
Good
today?
morning, Chris. What's happening in Vegas?
Guten Tag, as they say in Vegas.
Yes.
Yeah.
You say that
Vegas
all
is
the
good.
time.
All the time, every day. Yes.
Very nice. Well, everything here in Seattle is lovely. It's typical summer, so it's cold in the morning and gray, and then
Dude,
in the afternoon it'll be 85 and sunny. So
I love Seattle in the summer.
yeah,
It's so good.
it is really the best. It's the
I'll
best.
let you
Everything here
introduce
is great.
David.
Yeah,
You
great.
want to
All right.
introduce
So
David?
David Buck's I met David Buck through Pod Match, and he is a author and a speaker, and really sounded like he really when we spoke, we really connected because we have similar takes on time and similar takes on mindfulness and how those two things are related. And I'll let David introduce himself and just give us some of his background and stuff. But I think it's a really useful conversation for people that are out to be, navigate that tension between mindful and CEO, like how that
Right.
world works. So, David, good morning or good afternoon. You're in
Guten
Florida.
Tag.
Right, gents. There you go. Guten Tag.
Guten Tag.
Thank you all. Appreciate it, Aaron and Chris. It's an honor to be on the show today.
Thanks.
Yeah, love it.
David, talk a little bit about your background and how you got, how you wrote your book and what like that.
So I have spent most of my career, my corporate career, I call it, in business development. It's a fancy word. I was a salesperson. And if you are watching right now, heavy on the sarcasm, I knew early on in my career that these amazingly stunning good looks and charisma was not going to get me anywhere. And I had to learn what am I going to do to be able to be successful. And I found early on me being better prepared than my competition was one of the ways that I found success. And then that outcrop of that was the fact that how do I use my time in order to be as productive to, number one, sell more, but number two, make life easy for me. And then that translated making life easier for my clients and made life easier for them to do business with me. And that became my kind of cadence that I lived through. And as I began to lead salespeople, I have always felt that salespeople that have reported to me, most of them are better pure salespeople than I am. But I'm the guy that led on how to maximize their use of time. And so while I pushed them on their natural giftings, I also worked with them on improving their productivity, and that kind of stuck with me. And I ended up leaving corporate life to do that for a living because I found I was really helping friends, family, friends of friends, help them with their time and not getting any money for it.
Got to get paid.
Exactly.
So let's just jump into that, David, because I'd love to hear, that world of being productive in hustle culture. That generally means, either getting more done in, producing more widgets, putting your head down, working harder, or even the term working smarter, not harder, doesn't really get you outside of hustle culture. That's just the way that's
Smarter hustle.
Yeah, it's a smarter hustle. Talk to us a little bit about what you've discovered around time and how you approach it, the difference between time management and time optimization.
Sure. And I very much lived in the hustle culture for a long time. Even though I felt I was using my time well, I would always make an excuse to say, I can do one more thing, just have to do this, and then I'll get ahead. And then that vacuum got filled. There's always something to do. And I found that not only in myself, but as I work with clients, I don't like the phrase time management. I don't think it correctly reflects proper behavior for people in how they use their time. We all consume time the same, seconds a second to anybody, a year, whoever, but a lot can happen in the use of that. And I found that people who are like, hey, I'm managing my time, are reactive. So one of the first things I do with clients is show me your calendar. And so they'll pull their calendar up and I'll see a bunch of blocks blocked off. I said, what's happening there? Well, that's either a meeting I've called or somebody else has called a meeting for me. So then tell me what happens in all the empty space. Try to figure things out at that point. You know, I'll work on something. I said, well, what if somebody's a meeting bully and shoves something in right in an important time that you're supposed to be working? Well, I'll stop what I'm doing and handle that. And that's where the reactive nature of time management, you can be very productive when you react. The problem is all the things you need to get done are probably being pushed further out because you're going to do the last in, first out routine instead of what I like to do is flip that and be proactive, optimize your time, because optimize is not reactive, it's proactive, and it's never seeking or it's never getting to perfection. The journey is always there and you're always self-improving.
That's great. You know, David, one of the talks that I give, one of the classes or keynotes is, we were talking in the pre-show, is time management is bullshit. And it definitely takes because you can't manage time. The context is totally fucking off when you try and manage time. It's like you don't manage the weather. You don't manage the weather. If it's outside, it's raining, you put on a jacket, but you don't call putting on a jacket managing the weather. You're now responding to what the weather is. And people think about time management like it's this thing to manage. No, you don't manage time. You manage yourself in time. And people don't think they manage themselves, which is what you're talking about. They have an open schedule, and the metaphor, David, I love to use is, do you ever read The Cobbler and the Elves, the story about the cobbler and the elves?
No.
It's a kid's, young kid's story. It's a cobbler, and the king drops off all these shoes, and he can't get them done. He just can't get all the shoes done. There's no way to get all the shoes done in time. And he falls asleep, and he wakes up in the morning, and all the shoes are done. And he's amazed that all the shoes got done overnight. And he's like, how did all these shoes get done? What's happening? And it turns out these little elves came in the middle of the night. Little magic elves came in and they finished the shoes. And that's the way people deal with their calendar. They wake up in the morning and they're like, I'm overwhelmed. Like, who put that in your calendar? Did little elves put that in your calendar? Did you just wake up? There's not one thing in your calendar you didn't put there. Not one thing in your calendar that you didn't put there. It doesn't happen to you. It's not raining on you. It's raining. And so that attitude, I think, of David and what you're talking about being responsive, about being cause in the matter of your schedule, is what gives people the kind of power. And that, for me, is an expression of mindfulness. Is I'm mindful about my calendar. What am I putting in that space? One of the big Gary Keller things that, is if it's not in your calendar,
doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. So don't tell me you're committed to spending time with your family. If I look at your calendar and I don't see family time, you are not committed to being with your family. Because you're
warming my heart.
Right.
Warming
I figured
my heart.
This is your language, right? This is what you
Yes,
do.
it
That's
is.
totally it. If it's not in your calendar, then someone's going to bump it out. You're not caught. You're letting elves come in the middle of the night and book a meeting. Oh, I have a meeting I have to go to. What the fuck are you talking about? You have to go to it. Yeah. Why would you talk that way? So there's all that connection, I think, for mindfulness is, the changing the got to get to, when you get to go to that meeting, you're responsible for you asked to work at this job. You requested it. You filled out an application. You asked to work here.
Dave, can you define or distinguish optimize? Like, as you talk about it, how do you, like, what's the definition of it for you?
So I do optimization on 3 principles of preparation, execution, and control. So the first element is you can't optimize your time if you don't prepare. And some people are saying it's counterintuitive that I have to spend time to prepare and plan. Yes, you have to. Yes. Because then you will be able to be more productive. So preparation's key, whatever that is. Then once you're done preparing, you begin to execute. And I don't know about you guys, but rarely does something important in my life go the way I planned. There's always some adaptation or adjustment to that plan that has to happen. So I start to execute and I say, okay, do I have to change how I'm executing, or do I have to really stop what I'm doing and go back and prepare some more? Again, may sound counterintuitive, but if all you do is you're executing incorrectly, you're never going to get to the ultimate goal that you need to. So once you're in execution, you say, okay, I'm executing well. Then you shift yourself and say, I'm going to commit myself to control the outcome that I want to get out of this said task, activity, or project. And if you find yourself losing control, you stop again and say, do I need to go all the way back up and prepare again? Or do I need to adapt the way I'm executing? And the three work in tandem continuously until you have achieved that accomplishment. But then you're not done yet, because if it's something major, you need to reflect back on, what did I do well? What didn't I do well? So when I start the process again of preparation, execution, and control, I've learned from what I've done previously to make the present and the future more effective.
So the third one is control. So we got prepare,
Yes.
execute, and control. Okay, got it.
Correct. Yep.
I can hear, Aaron, I can hear in that too, just and David, the role of mindfulness in between those spaces. Like there's a preparing, but am I preparing mindfully or am I preparing robotically? Am I executing just out of hypnotic rhythm, as Napoleon Hill would call it, or am I being mindful about the execution? You know, am I controlling it by trying to steamroll it, or am I controlling it from a space of like, you know, a beginner's mind or other tenets of mindfulness?
Right. Well, there's also, you know, in control, there's the control phase. What you're calling control phase, David, is really, you know, are you reflecting openly without judgment on the results? You know, or are you judging them against some standard? And that's the whole thing. Just still comes down to responsibility, like personal. Is it against a standard? Or am I you know, like the opportunity to just sit with it and look to see without judgment, where did that result land me? And what's next? Like a authentic time for reflection versus all the stuff that comes in the hustle, which is, fuck, I didn't get there. We missed our target by 3. What are we going to do? Let's get this done. And then there's no more time to regroup, go back and go, okay, now we have to prepare. Maybe the problem was in the preparation.
That's correct. Yep.
You know, maybe we prepared or regardless, if we didn't hit the mark, we need some new way to prepare. We need to prepare again. Even if the problem wasn't in the preparation, it was in the execution. You still got to go back to, do we have the bullets for I hate that metaphor. Sorry. You know, do we have the seeds to plant again? There we go. Okay. You know, but like to go back and look to see, to retill the soil. Yeah, I really would rather not use war metaphors. You know, retill the soil and then look to see where the problem was. But all that stuff being done, really, David, I mean, you know, inside what you're talking about, why people resist preparation. You know, it's our little slogan around here. Don't just do something, sit there. And that's what people resist. And I got for myself the other day, sitting is an action. That's an action. Sitting, reflecting, listening, wondering, pondering. All actions, all active, not do nothing.
Yeah.
Sit there.
And you can do that. I feel like you could do that, Aaron, in each of the things that David just said.
Totally.
Like, you know, to sit there in preparation, to sit there in execution, to sit there in control. Like, it sounds counterintuitive, but like you could be executing and also sitting there.
Yeah. Well, Werner used to say all the time that, you know, if you need to go fast, slow down.
Well, and what I love what both of you are saying there is the fact that entrepreneurs and business owners and business leaders feel that they have to go from one thing to the next so many times. And I try to say, you need to stop. Your team or your company, they need your creative, innovative, and productive brain.
Mhm.
That's what you're there for. That's what you bring. Yes, sometimes you have to be in the tactics, but if you're not stopping to reflect on what's going well and wrong, or if you're not challenging processes that are there, or if you're not strategically thinking of what does a year or 5 years look down the road, you are missing so many opportunities to be more productive in the future.
Yeah, that's, that opportunity to reflect and even to recharge, like soothing to solving. Do people take enough time during their day to be at their peak? Even the strategies like the Pomodoro method of working. You're familiar,
Yes.
David? Yes.
I am.
So for anyone who's not watching, it's not, it doesn't have to be exactly this, but the sort of standard is 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. And you do that for 3 rounds, 25 minutes, 5, 25 minutes, 5, 25 minutes, 5, and then 25 minutes, and you take a 20-minute break. So you're doing it so it's a 2-hour block where you've got 3 5-minute breaks and then 1 20-minute break at the end. And, you can do anything for 2 hours if you do it that way. You can focus on anything for 25 minutes. And if you focus on it for 25 minutes, even if it's just sitting, and that's the other thing in terms of preparation, David, that I hear that is so often missing it's always missing in hustle culture. It's the defining principle of hustle culture is, I've been on this little tear recently about this thought that in the 1960s, if you were running, people would wonder who's chasing you, because there was no context for running for health. That wasn't a thing. And in the 70s or late 70s, really, it's really late 70s, early 80s, if you were pumping iron, lifting weights, you would be doing it solely to look like Arnold, because there was no context for resistance training for health. And if you're just sitting and meditating now, it occurs like you're a hippie or you're a yogi. There's no context for sitting as a methodology for preparing the brain, but you work out your aerobic capacity and no one thinks you're weird anymore. You work out your muscle capacity and no one thinks you're weird anymore. You rest your brain for 20 minutes a day and you build the prefrontal cortex, you build gray matter in your brain that allows you to be more responsive and less reactive. And you're literally building it the same way you build your aerobic capacity or your physical muscle capacity with those other trainings. You're building your brain by sitting and meditating for 20 minutes a day. It's just we don't have a container for it yet.
And it's not looked at as valuable time.
It's not looked at like, but they go to the gym for an hour.
Right.
And that's, at least they don't go to the gym for an hour, but they could, and it would be justifiable. And those that do report unbelievable benefits. They're like, the most important time of my day is that day where I get to do that. Good. So then add 10 minutes a day of sitting in silent meditation, 10 minutes a day of breathing. And you're literally building gray matter, scientifically proven, 25 years of history, but recent scientific studies have shown you actually build up the brain cells in the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible. And I got to get this. I got to figure out if this is parasympathetic or what's the other sympathetic? I know just enough to be dangerous here, so this is a problem. But at any rate, you're building up the ability to respond and stop being so fucking reactive about everything.
I would just add one thing to that.
Yeah,
if you can't do 10 minutes, then start with 1 minute.
Totally.
And build it up, because if you start with 10 minutes, I know for me, I would be like 30 seconds into it going, there's only 30 seconds gone, because our brains are so used to having all these things at us. Whereas if you start with 1 minute and slowly build yourself up, that 10 minutes then becomes a almost like a mini vacation for you.
Yes.
It becomes a period where you get to disengage from all the stuff and give yourself that quiet time. And so I'm a full fan of quiet time, something I'm working on. So I don't, people
That's
who
a,
know me would be saying, Dave's not there yet, and totally recognize that. But again, it's worth the investment for the journey.
that's really good, David. You just so I just recently got up on Insight Timer. Do you know what Insight Timer is?
Mm-mm.
It's an app. It's a free app that has just thousands of meditations on it. Thousands of different teachers have put up meditations on there. But I just saw the opportunity of putting up a 1 minute practice, a 2 minute practice,
Oh, awesome.
3 minute practice, a 4 minute practice, a 5 minute practice, up to 10 minutes, so that people can build that muscle. And I've been big with the people that study with me on microdosing mindfulness, because microdosing has become a trendy thing anyway. But you could microdose mindfulness when you're doing anything. You could just literally just take a breath and think, this is what my feet feel like on the ground, without labeling it, just noticing this is what my feet feel like, and getting into the experience for just a breath of the feet on the ground, or your hands on the steering wheel, or whatever. This is what my coffee tastes like. Not labeling it, not saying, oh, this is good. No, just this, and experiencing what it tastes like. That's microdosing mindfulness. And even that, taking the break to experience your experience doing whatever it is you're doing, is a remarkable thing to do. And you can do that even for less than a minute. So there's your microdosing part. It's like, okay, 3 times today, I'm just going to notice. And I have a little app, the mindfulness bell, and you can set the timer, and it just rings randomly during the hour, random times during an hour. And even if it just whenever it rang, or even every time you got a text, you already have a random bell you already have a random bell.
Yeah.
But rather than having that thing force you to react and check the text, even if you took one breath every time it rang, one full breath, and experience whatever you were experiencing. This is the temperature of the air right now. This is how my body feels right now. Every time you get a bell, you'd be training your brain to experience life in the present. And I have yet to meet anyone who thinks, oh, I'm way too present.
I like it from the standpoint of particularly that technique in emotionally charged situations.
Yes.
So you're stressed out in front of a client presentation that's maybe not going as well as you think, or you've got family challenges, whatever it is. That one breath helps you not trigger your amygdala, so you don't get hijacked. So it keeps you in your it trains your brain to say, hang on a second, it's not fight or flight. I'm only in a meeting with the client. Let's back it down a little bit. Let's try to let the logic come in on this, so that we don't so that we don't sit in an emotional state and end up saying something that's going to cost us a lot more time later trying to repair what we just did.
Really good, David. Really good. It's a way of getting out of system 1 thinking and into system 2. As Kahneman would say, this is your path out of cognitive bias of the amygdala thinking, is slowing down. And I love the idea of using the random bell that you already have, because we all have that bell that triggers an immediate response. But even just noticing and stopping, and and I have lost more business than I'd like to admit by responding to a text immediately, than stopping and thinking, okay, what's the appropriate response here? What kind of response would produce the best result? Because while it occurs in the moment that it must be responded to right now, I know, David, I don't know your system personally, but I guarantee you your system includes, you don't respond to emails when you're doing other things.
Right. I am not a fan of the term multitasking. I don't believe we can do it. A lot of smarter people with a lot of more letters after their name than I do have done detailed research that says our brains are wired to do one thing at a time.
Yeah.
And when you sit, about the closest thing I can think for multitasking to me is a musician who can play an instrument and sing at the same time. However, that's thousands and thousands of hours that they have trained their brain again to be able to do that. Geddy Lee, my favorite rock band is Rush, and he had his autobiography earlier this year, and he was talking about how he said, we have been doing this for so long that I was playing the bass, I was singing, I was playing synthesizer with my foot on the foot pedals. And he said, I'm thinking the next song that I have to play. So his brain was trained during that time frame, but that's really not multitasking because you've trained your brain to do that. And so I tell people, if you think you can multitask and you work for an employer, do this for me. Go in and bring your laptop while it's the boss has his staff meeting and start working on email. And when the boss looks at you and says, what are you doing? He says, I'm multitasking, boss, because I'm going to do my email and listen to you at the same time. Tell me how well that goes.
It's a great metaphor. Yeah. And David, you know, it's interesting that you mentioned multitasking, because the truth is that wasn't a term until computers got more than one processor.
Ah, there you go.
It wasn't a thing until computers had more than one processor. So the computer actually has 2 brains, 3 brains, 10 brains that can, in fact, do things in the background. And we have one processor. That's it. It is not possible to multitask because you only literally have one processor. Now, Geddy Lee and musicians, and we love the metaphor for musicians on the show. We use musicians as a reference point all the time. They're still not multitasking. That's one task that they've expanded the capacity of that task to include making that music. But it's just because they've expanded what that one processor can do. But it's still, they're not, Geddy Lee is not responding to emails while he's doing that.
That's right.
He's expanded the domain in which the music can now hold. You know, that he's expanding the capacity of the brain to do the one thing, to mean more, to be a wider circle, but it's still one thing. It's not 2 disparate things. And I love the example of open your computer in front of your boss, you know, and you and I know that there are, you know, this is why Zoom is such a different experience for someone delivering a talk than doing the talk live. Because when you're doing the talk live, people are actually doing one thing. And when you're doing it on Zoom, I think it's super conservative to think only half of them have only one screen open.
Right.
Right. It's almost no one who has only one screen open at a time. You all got a screen open, or you're listening to this while you're driving, which is you know, because you can do the driving part on automatic. But you couldn't do it on automatic when you learned how to drive. You know, I don't know. You got kids, David?
I do. I taught both kids to drive the car. That was all that they were. When I learned how to drive, I wasn't allowed to have the stereo on or anything. It's like, here's what's expected of you. And it isn't until hours and hours behind the wheel that your body's trained on what to do. And even listening to like the radio or a podcast in the car, you're not getting everything. And plenty of times I've been on a walk with a podcast and I send myself a note saying, I need to go back to 15 minutes because that was really cool. I'm never going to remember that. Or wait, stop, let me rewind that because that was a really cool point. Because what's happening? I'm losing focus because something outside got my attention that I really liked.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I bookmark things on Audible all the time so that I can go back to it. And that's the difference between reading and listening in the car. You know, reading is single tasking. Mm-hmm. You're not doing anything else when you're reading. I can't listen to music with lyrics and read. I just can't. I can't do it. because I can listen to instrumentals, but yeah, and taking care of your brain in that way, and being aware of your attention. And that's the big superpower that mindfulness gives you, is the ability to focus, the ability to train your brain to stay in the present on whatever task it is you're doing. And everything we talked about around the practices of developing the capacity, the sitting for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, builds that capacity to extend our attention from goldfish length to a useful length. Because otherwise, and that's the thing, when people say I can't sit for 10 minutes, because we haven't trained our brain to do it. And just a tip for anyone who's first starting meditation, the meditation's not the practice of thinking of nothing. It's not emptying the mind of thought. And that's the way meditation and mindfulness occurs for people. Like, I've got to stop my mind from thinking. It's the goal. It's myth of meditation, about meditation. The goal is to notice the thoughts. So every time that you think, oh, that's been 30 seconds, good. That's the win. That you noticed you were distracted. That's the win. That's the point, is to shorten that length of time between the time you get distracted and you notice you're distracted. Not get distracted, but to notice that you're distracted, and then come back to the breath, to come back to the anchor, whatever the anchor is for you in that practice. Which is why practicing, this is the way my feet feel on the ground, is so potent for people, for a developmental tool, because you're now have an anchor that's with you all the time. Your feet are always on the ground somewhere. They always feel in a particular way somehow. So to be able to train your brain to be able to focus on something, or to notice what your brain is focused on, is the point, not to not get distracted. That's never going to happen. I mean, I might be able to go, I've been practicing meditation for a long time, and I might be able to go 3 breaths without being distracted, without some external thought, extraneous thought come in. So it's not, don't get distracted. It's the notice. And I think that's a big piece of what you're training people in terms of optimization, is to notice your schedule. One thing
Yes.
I found, go ahead, you go.
I was just gonna say, so you mentioned distractions, and I want to bring up, for me and my work with clients, I use an assessment tool that's the foundation on how I work with people. And distractions are the number one time management attribute, or time challenge attribute, out of 20. And it is an incremental game. Again, where I tell people, don't worry about solving the problem with the distractions. Pick one thing. If your phone is, and it's the single biggest productivity tool that we have in the palm of our hands, it's also the biggest thing that's going to impede us from being productive, because it's designed to what? It's designed for us to consume time on it. And it can be great time and it can be horrible time. But the idea that you want to do there is to say, okay, identify my phone as a challenge. Then start with quarantining it for a period of time that you need to get something done. So if for the next half hour, it's really important to get this done, fine, put the phone in the other room. Do whatever you need to do. But then start incrementally. And then when you find you're going to have deeper points of focus. I love Cal Newport's work. I have a love-hate relationship with Cal Newport's work, Deep Work. And the love relationship is, it's a great way when you can get into a deep work zone. The hate relationship I have with it is that I don't feel I can implement it all, because I'm naturally designed. There are times I want to be distracted. And so he's like, go into a 3-hour deep work zone. That's great. But there are times when I got a client I know is going to be calling me, or I know I need to reach out, or I want to be semi-available in case somebody comes to a problem with me. And so I start with, I'm going to have a half an hour of deep work. I'm going to live in that zone for a half an hour, not do the 3 hours. And when you do that, you find that other challenges that you have with time in your life get better because it's all interlocked and interrelated.
Yeah. And you develop that skill. That's where Pomodoro is so useful, is you get that 5 minute, 25 minutes. Nobody is going to need you to respond in less than 25 minutes. There's so rare is the occasion where there's an emergency in our business, in our day, where someone needs us in less than that 25-minute window. It's just not happening. You're not, as my partner, my business partner, Christine would say, I'm not your beck and call bitch. I'm not your beck and call bitch. But one of the biggest hurdles we get with new agents is during their time that's meant to be blocked for lead gen, which is whatever time amount of 2 or 3 hour block that they have to do outbound calling, is, well, what if I get a call from a client during that 3 hours? Good. You'll call them back when you're done. You're just not available. And people say, well, I needed to show a house between, time blocking. Well, 9 to 12 is my lead gen time. And if I needed to show them a house between 9 and 12. No, you didn't. You weren't available then. I've had these classes that we do where it's once a month and it's all day. And people are like, well, I can't be there in the afternoon because I have a client. That was the only time I had free. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? You didn't have that free. You did not have that available. That was blocked out. That's why you blocked it out. And if you don't have the wherewithal to say, I'm blocking this time for this activity, then the game is lost. You have no say. You're now at the whim of the weather. People fear commitment because they're like, well, that's going to lock me in. That's going to limit my freedom. And my response, my commitment, my stand in that matter is, no, your only access to freedom is commitment. That's all you get is commitment. If you want to live a created life, create your life. Otherwise, you're a leaf in the wind, and a leaf in the wind has no freedom. The leaf is now at the whim of the wind. That's not a free. You don't get any freedom in that. So the constraints, the containers you build, right, Chris? That's our favorite thought, is containers. We love containers. The containers you built it. You're the one who built it. That's living a creative life. You want to live a creative life? Good. Say where you're going to be 3 months from now on a Thursday at 2. Now you've created your life. But until you say where you're going to be, I can't commit to something 3 months from now because I don't know where I'm going to be. No, you don't know where you're going to be because you didn't create it. It's the other way around.
And I love that. I'm sorry, go ahead, Chris.
You can go, David. I was going to ask you a question, but you follow up on that and then I'll ask.
So as I looked at that too, that it goes back to that proactive nature. And I love, like, I have appointments, like you said, 6 months out from now. And I used to be hung up like, I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow. Why would I put something 6 months out from now? Because the idea is once you get closer to that, and I am a fan, I look at my calendar. I have a rolling 2-week calendar. I look at out 2 weeks all the time, but I adopt it as what called the wet cement. So when you pour the foundation on cement, you have time to adjust and change it before it cures. But unless you pour the foundation, nothing gets set. So the idea is you continue, you can adapt and adjust that. And the idea is once you get closer to that date, let's say, okay, I booked something 6 months out. I'm now a couple of weeks from that. And I'm going, ooh, I don't know if I can do that or not. Well, if you call and say 2 weeks ahead of time, can we adjust this a little bit, please? I've had some stuff come up. I have not had anyone in that scenario come back to me and say, oh, Dave, you made that commitment 6 months ago. I'm never doing business with you again. No, it's more like, Oh, okay. Well, Friday's good. How about Friday? Perfect. Let's
That's
adjust.
how we got here. We were
Right.
committed for Tuesday, and then Chris got a new job, and I went and emailed everyone we had booked for Tuesdays and said our new time is on Friday. And one person was like, I can't do that time, but none of them were like, I will never reschedule with you.
There you go. There you
It's
go.
like, that's the way life, but you're creating your life. Yeah. Great.
I feel like containers are strategic commitments, they're choices, they're things they're intentions I put into things. And I think sometimes in this podcast, there's a tension between the mindful side of business and the CEO side of business. Like on the CEO side, you've got productivity, KPIs, you've got, deadlines, you've got things you're trying to accomplish, goals. And then on the mindful side, you're trying to enjoy the journey and stay in flow and, non-striving and be with it. And I hear in the title of your work, when you're talking about optimizing time, the CEO side of my brain kicks in and goes, what are the strategies? How are you being deliberate about the optimization of time? And I'm just curious if you could speak to a little bit about how you teach that. How do you teach the strategic side of optimizing time?
Great. Thank you. Good question. And I like KPIs, but there's a big distinction that people need to do with KPIs, because I have many clients I work with have lagging indicator KPIs. So like, well, my sales volumes, I want to do 10 million this year. Perfect. That's not a KPI. That's a result of
Right.
what you want to do to get there. So tell me, what are all the facets and the things that you need to do to be able to achieve that $10 million? And from that, then you set up robust processes. I'm a fan of automation to a point. I think automation can give us a false sense of security, but the more you establish those objective metrics, the more you're able to say to your team, okay, these are my expectations from sales, ops, marketing, or whatever to achieve the $10 million. You let them go. That to me is the CEO side. And I love to sit in the CEO side because I love that's also my problem. That's my curse, because then I'm like going, oh, wow, okay, I'm measuring this. I made that metric. I didn't make that one. But the idea is you set those up to free your brain to move over to the other side, to then say, now that the machine's humming and I can objectively measure what's happening, I get to live in the idea of, I've always wanted to add this part to my business. How do I do that? I've always wanted to pursue this avenue. How do I do that? You can't do that if you haven't set expectations or you resolve the CEO side of your brain, as you said. You'll always be there. And then before you know it, your competition's beating you because they've gone around you on something innovative. Your clients are pushing you for price because that's all you're focused on now, because you haven't thought about the value that you're bringing. So all those, and then that forces you to stay in the CEO side because you're like, I got to figure out price so that we can meet the revenue. So that's the balance to me. Optimization is getting your stuff set right so you free yourself to live in the innovative side of life.
Yeah, I definitely hear the preparation of your 3 steps, preparation in that. Like if you're not prepared and you shoot from the hip, your life will be a reaction. You won't have a say. You won't, to Aaron's point earlier, you won't be able to create your life. You're just going to react. You're going to be a leaf in the wind. So I hear that. I hear the strategy of preparation in order to optimize something. And then I think too, like I can hear that in that preparation, it gives you the space to be mindful, whether that's for a minute or 10 minutes, but it just gives you space to access things you otherwise don't get to access.
The other piece, the other piece that David's talking about, that you didn't say it this way, but it's there in the background, and it's what we would distinguish, or what's been distinguished with us or for us, and we use as integrity, is the difference between keeping your word and honoring your word. Is that there's a big difference in those two worlds, that we're wired and trained from a very young age that it's good to keep your word. And that if you're only going to use promises to describe things, which leaves you using promises to only describe things that you know are going to happen. Don't promise things you don't know are going to happen. It's a big thing about committing 3 months out. I don't know where I'm going to be. I can't promise that. Because then I want, I'll be a bad person if I break my word there, if I have to move the podcast. Versus honoring your word. You go 2 weeks out and you look to see, is there anything now that I need to be in communication about for the next 2 weeks? So you're bringing honor to your word. You're going to tell everybody in that 2-week period, this thing that I said was going to happen a week from now isn't going to happen a week from now. It's going to happen 3 weeks from now. You're bringing honor to the promise you made. And in that world where you're emphasizing the opportunity of honoring your word versus keeping your word as a good thing, good, bad, right, wrong, you're now in the world of honoring your word, like what's going to give me the most power and the performance. I'm going to communicate to everyone about the word that I gave so that they know, because look, 2 weeks from now, they're going to find out it wasn't going to happen. So you're not hiding it. I'm not going to be on the podcast on Tuesday, so I better tell you now. And if you give people enough lead time, like you said, there is nobody who ever gives you any pushback. Nobody ever says that, and if it's your boss, right? I promised my report was going to be done next Friday. I can see now that it's not. Tell me what in my schedule that here's the other things in my schedule that you asked me to do. Which ones of these are less important? Because I can take those out. If this report being due now is more important to you, I'll do that. But here's my schedule and the things that I have promised. So you work it out in reality versus try and jam it all in when it's not going to get done anyway. And in that world, promises then become an opportunity to see, in my view, the only purpose promises really serve is to make things happen that wouldn't happen if I didn't promise them. And now promises become a tool for fulfilling a future that I'm committed to versus a tool to describe. Like, I don't have to promise the pen is going to drop. I don't have to promise the pen's going to fall when I let go. I don't need to promise that, although I could, because I know that's going to happen. What's the point? No, promise is I'm promising something's going to happen that it wouldn't happen. The metaphor for me is Batman. I love Batman. I love the Adam West Batman. Do you remember the Adam West Batman?
I do.
And the bat hook, and he'd throw
Same
it up
bat
on the
time.
building. He'd
Yes.
pull himself up the building. Promises in that world become the bat hook, and you throw it way out in the future, and you use the promise to pull you into a future that you weren't going to have if you didn't make the promise. And every day you're looking to see, who do I need to be and what do I need to do to fulfill that promise? And now, if I'm not going to get there by the time I said I would get there, okay, well, then I'll let people know that I'm not going to get there when I said I was going to get there. And here's when I am going to get there. Or you know what? I'm no longer going to get there. So you better find someone else to do it, because it's not going to be me, because I'm not willing to, or I don't see a pathway to getting it done. I'm willing, but help me with the pathway. So all those things become available when you get into, like you said, David, a proactive relationship with your life. We say proactive relationship with your schedule, but what is time but some abstraction, some abstract way to break your life down into a common criteria? There's no time for a dog. Dogs don't have the abstraction time.
Right.
It's a language-based phenomenon. It's an abstraction. So can I be responsible for the way you and I have created time together in partnership? So all that world becomes available inside what you were talking about, David. And you didn't distinguish it that way, but I know that's in the background because you already said it. Like, you break yourself down into 2-week increments and 2 weeks is probably enough time for most people to be able to re-promise without pushback. It's way bigger deal to say, hey, I can't make it tomorrow.
Right.
Then I can't make it 2 weeks from now, but not always. Oh, anyway. I actually have a promise for another call in 5 minutes. So there you go. My little reminder came up. So I didn't realize, but this is a really fun conversation, David. There's a lot in here for people. So if people want to get a hold of you, David, where do they reach you? How do they find out more about your process?
Well, first of all, Aaron and Chris, thank you. I always say that for me, I enjoyed myself. The time flew by.
There you
So
go.
that's an indicator there. People can reach me at infinitylifestyledesign.com. Again, infinitylifestyledesign.com. On the front page, they can go a variety of directions. One, they can click on and download chapter 1 of my book. So you're kind of like, this optimization thing, what the heck is this dude talking about? I need to know this a little bit more. Download the first chapter. And then if you like more, it's available where you can ever find books are sold. And then if you're kind of curious about, well, gosh, myself, I've got some ideas, but maybe I'd like to dig a little deeper on my own use of time. Then further down on the front of the page, there's a link for you to take what's called the time management analysis. It's
Awesome.
the 20 attributes I was talking about. Take that link, you'll get a free summary report there that gives you a benchmark and a starting time frame to say, this is what I can do, and this is the area I can focus on to help bring more productivity in my life.
Love it.
Love it. Yeah. Awesome.
David, thanks for the time.
You gentlemen as well. It's been an honor. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Hey, friends, if you like that episode, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. To get our 6-Figure Agent Blueprint and other free resources, you can visit sixfigureagent.net. That's a number 6figureagent.net today.